This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, Ron, if you could start.
Yeah, so my name is Ron Howard. I work for Peerless Food Equipment. We're a mixer manufacturer as well as dough handling. And I am the global sales manager, and I cover the Western region and South America.
Okay, welcome, Ron. John?
Yeah, hi, John Hunter from Beulah, and account manager responsible for bakery and ingredient handling, which does
Thank you,
include
John.
some mixing systems. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, John. Amy?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Amy Estrada with Rodemaker Systems Integration. I'm the engineering manager.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Amanda?
Yes, hi, I'm Amanda Gonzalez. I'm sorry you can't see me as we were discussing before, a little webcam issue, but I am the Director of Member Relations for the American Society of Baking. I've been with ASB for 11 years now, and I'm just loving my time with this group. And it's one big happy family, so I'm glad that I can be a part of this. So welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm Kent Van Amberg, the Executive Director of ASB. Our host today is Ken Schwenger. Ken, if you can introduce yourself and then just kick off the discussion.
Good morning, everybody. Ken Schwenger. I started Bakery Concepts about 11 years ago, primarily to represent the Rapidojet technology, but I've been with ASB, I don't even know how many years. Been in the industry since 1986, and I appreciate everybody joining this call. The topic is mixing, but I can see that I anticipate it's going to range a little bit. The last lunch and learn, which is the other format that ASB handles virtually. I sat in on that, and it was pretty clear at the end of the session that a lot of issues were not fully discussed. There were a good number of open issues, open questions, and so when I was asked to host this, I thought that mixing automation might be a very good topic to revisit. And again, as Ken said, this is going to be recorded and viewed later. The link is going to be sent out. So I think that this one's going to be pretty valuable because all of us can kind of push it out to our contacts, customers, prospects, colleagues, and hopefully we'll be able to learn a little bit more about the technology and share what we've been doing for a long time. So the way I'd like to start is just kind of call on each of you to participate and give your input as far as what your primary needs, interest levels are in, again, primarily mixing. So if it's okay, I'd like to call on you and just ask you to give your perspective. So if it's okay, I'd like to start with Amy with Rademacher. I know it's primarily makeup systems, but what if you can kind of focus on your interests in mixing, as your systems take dough, are you really focused on consistency, hydration levels? Are you focused on artisan products? Are you concerned about dough tail out, bucky doughs, those kinds of things? So, what would you like to share, Amy, about your equipment and your concerns regarding mixing?
Well, being in integration, it really depends on our customer. So our issues are usually a wide range. We can have customers who have specific temperature requirements, and those are always interesting issues. Do you jacket your agitator? Do you only jacket the bowl? Do you do both? So, we run into a lot of issues where customers need to have certain product temperatures. Because we kind of have a similar dough with every project, because laminating and sheeting is kind of what we do. We tend to have the same mixing needs for a lot of customers, but it really depends on what the customer is doing. So I would say that our biggest concern when we are looking at mixing is what is the mixer capable of, and how wide of a product range can it handle? Because we do work with such different customers.
Okay. And are you focused at all? Do you have any concerns about gluten-free dough? Is that a focus for you?
Not necessarily. I mean, within our division, we've not yet worked with a customer who required gluten-free products, but because we are an integrator, or I am a part of the integration division, I have to have resources for anything that comes our way.
Okay. I see that Rod has joined. How you doing, Rod? Can you hear us? Okay, we'll come back to Rod. Ron, I noticed that you were on the last call with the Lunch and Learn. I think you were driving at the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was correct. And I got to a point where it dropped out, and I was just like, I'm not gonna be able to dial back in. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, as one of the two primary people on the call dealing specifically with mixing, are there any? And I've got an awful lot of. I got a list that I hopefully we can get through most of this, because as I mentioned during that Lunch and Learn, there were a lot of topics that we were not able to fully get through because there's a lot of issues, especially since this is kind of many people see mixing as the very beginning of the process. But are there any specific issues, especially based on that last conversation, Ron, that you would like to focus on today, whether it's safety, sanitation, downtime, preventative maintenance issues, prehydration, energy consumption, those kinds of things? Is there something that you would really like to focus on today?
Well, one of the things, and you just kind of touched on it. The main, we've asked our customers, and we continue to ask our customers, what are you looking for out of mixing? Which is a fairly broad question that we're looking for, because we're trying to figure out, it's like, what does the customer need? And I mean, dough temperatures are always important. How to deliver ingredients, how to move dough away from the mixer, the mixing in the beginning. Those are all important, but they do focus a lot on, they want lower maintenance costs, faster maintenance, and they want obviously consistent dough. And sanitation is huge these days, and they seem to be dealing with a progressively lower skilled workforce. So we're trying to make consistent doughs, day in, day out, with people that aren't, it used to be you'd have a head baker that would know exactly how to properly mix a dough to get it to the next piece of the, of equipment. And we don't seem to have that anymore. So it's trying to make sure that dough consistency comes out, every single time, every single batch, the same. And that's been a progressive challenge.
Yeah, there's consistency is an issue that I constantly run up against or hear about. It's I'm not sure how correct it is to say it, but you can potentially have a product that is not of the highest quality, but if it's consistent every day, then that baker's customer is going to be happier than if it varies, if the consistency varies, because then they don't really know what to expect. So yeah, consistency, I believe, is huge. Plus, you always hear in this industry about the fact that we are dealing in an art and a science, and without educated, experienced head bakers, both of those things kind of go out the window, and then you sort of get back to the consistency thing. But in the issues that I had written down ahead of time, sanitation, temperature control, and maintenance were among the top three. And when we deal with sanitation, yeah, go ahead.
No, I totally agree. Those are the top three that we deal with day in, day out. And we try to design around, but it seems that every time that we take a step forward, somebody will take, if we make it easier for them, they get a lower level person to start doing the work.
Right.
They move their skilled people somewhere else.
Yep. And as far as some concrete ideas regarding sanitation, there were issues that exist regarding the introduction of water, spraying water, especially using high pressure, and then it gets into the bearings, it gets into all of these areas where you don't want water, which then leads to downtime, which is exceedingly expensive. These bakeries, obviously, the large commercial bakeries, they need to be up all the time. Downtime costs them a tremendous amount of money. But in addition to the water, getting into the cracks and crevices and all of that, there's chemicals. So can you address the issue of when cleaning needs to occur, which happens all the time? Is it just water? And pardon my ignorance, but are your customers injecting any cleaning chemicals into those mixers that need to be addressed?
Well, some are, some aren't. I mean, I have several customers that do allergen cleans, so they definitely are putting in solutions, and cleaning, the various parts, and then they're swabbing in some cases for allergens when they do changeovers. We try to help them with going with the least allergen products that you have to the most. I deal with a lot of I'll say bar manufacturers, because we make mixers for like doughs and then bars and cookies and just about everything. So the bar manufacturers seem to have the hardest time because they'll all of a sudden they'll start with like granolas and stuff like that, but then they'll go to like nuts and peanuts, and we all know about peanut allergies. And we do deal with a few gluten-free facilities, so half of their facility will be gluten-free, the other half won't, and so yeah, cleaning becomes a monstrous part in sanitation, just to make sure that they don't contaminate product down the line.
Right.
I'm not a sanitation expert, but I know that it's something that you can design only so far, and you have to then rely on the maintenance people and sanitation staff to take over from there and do a good job.
And then this next question really kind of goes back to that, and you mentioned it, but this applies to all of our equipment. But John, Ron mentioned swabbing. So all equipment, especially these very, very large bakeries, they have to have certain sanitary standards. They've got people inside the organizations that are responsible for this. But then, can you talk about inspections from local, state agencies? What do they do? Do they come in and swab the equipment occasionally and then test for that, and then find the hell out of the baker if something's not up to specs? How does that occur?
Sorry, to me, was that to me?
Yeah.
Or yeah. I mean, we know some customers see that. We have some customers who we don't do any mixing in the area, but we supply ingredient handlings in some meat factories. And of course, the rules there are very specific, and very specific regulation. They typically have people on site doing testing, etc. So from our point of view, is those interfaces from our system to the mixing system are obviously where we hear about it sometimes. I think it's really interesting enough. It's not something that we've heard a lot about. I mean, because of my past history on the production side, I'm aware of a lot of those requirements and have been involved in implementing them. But I think the most surprising thing for me is it doesn't get talked about as much as I would have expected. I think COVID has not helped that, because I think some of the inspections that were happening, and they seem to be like increasing inspections, then suddenly stopped entirely. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that is revised. In terms of how we're designing and how to address the requirements of our customers, I think it's I think, especially for the larger customers, and we all know the names of the larger bakers, etc. We have very specific requirements from them. Joe Bloggs down the road, who is just a small one-man band. The likelihood is they really don't have that many requirements, and often they might be using secondhand mixers or whatever. But if you're talking to a lot of these blue chip companies, the requirements, because they're trying to protect their brand, are very specific and very uncomfortable sometimes, of course, because but I think what it does is that means we, as suppliers into those industries, have to have an understanding of how we're going to deal with those. And I know from a Beulah point of view, what we did was we actually have somebody who's in North America now, who's part of our team, who was a specialist in food safety for exactly that reason. And that was a change, because where the industry was, I think everybody was doing something about it, but it was really left to people like me, who are scientists who've gone into industry, to really, well, this is what I think. And clearly I'm not a food safety specialist. So I'm using that as an example. But now the recognition that, as the larger groups, bimbos, flowers, all of these types of people, they have these very demanding requirements. We have to step up as we in what we design for mixing, etc. And of course, for us, Beulah, we if some of our mixing systems, for example, things like batter systems or whatever, which where we might have egg components going in, and some of our the mixers that we supply to places like dairy, we of course have to have integrated CIP systems, and those requirements we've got to have, the normal validation verification systems, which now are very specific. We've got clear guidelines of what we have to do. So as we're looking at food safety, sanitation, it's not just good enough now to have designs of solutions that are just, oh yes, our mixer can be cleaned. We have to be thinking about, well, how are we going to validate that cleaning, and how are we going to verify that cleaning? So the landscape has changed quite significantly over the last few years, and we all have to address that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And you see a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ron, you had mentioned that you're seeing changes having to be made to equipment to take into account the fact that the lower skill level. But the other thing that we're seeing is just not enough people, not a reduction in the number of people that are available in the workforce. And ASB and ABA are redoing their workforce study. We're going to be sending out surveys and finding out what impact. But so what changes, I'll throw this out to the whole group. So what changes have you seen in requirements from the bakeries to take account of not only just a lower level of skill in the workforce, but just fewer people and the need for more automation? What impact is that having on your manufacturing?
Ken, it's funny. That's a great question. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me I'm looking for. He's trying to fill about 20 positions at his bakery. His bakery holds, uses about 100 people. He's not a great big bakery, but it's a decent size. And he got 8 applicants. He hired them all. One person showed up and left the next day. And it's just like every bakery I walk into, they say, I just can't get people, to come in. There just doesn't seem to be enough people in the workforce. And I have no idea why that is, but we've been handling far more automation. I'm getting far more requests for automation than I ever have before. Mixing's great, but how do I get, product from, your mixer to, somebody's line? And, there's been a lot of focus on I don't know if anybody was at Pack Expo, but obviously robotics is a big deal. But some of those robotic ideas are great, but they're really expensive. So how, the question comes up, how can we automate? What can we do better for automation to make the front end guys' life easier? Because mixing is hard work. Bakeries aren't easy. These aren't easy jobs. And
Yeah.
it's not like they're not trying to pay well, but they can't get bodies in.
Yeah. I can tell you, sorry guys, I was a little bit late today. So hello everybody. One area that I want a small example that I can give you in this terms of automation. Recently, I executed a very large liquid egg handling system, automated trucks, think of tanks, think of headers and flow meters. It was the client that challenged me in the way how to control the sanitation people going into CIP mode. And we developed a pretty neat concept where my CIP skid will recognize, will look at a database from the client. It will look at a point at the database of employees that are allowed to operate the skid. So the employee had to enter his employee code number into the computer at the CIP skid to be allowed to do the process. Not that we are worried about the guy that doesn't have enough skill. He's already in the sanitation department. He already knows what he has to do, but this was brand new to them. And the concern was somebody will screw up and nobody's gonna know who screwed up. So we developed the system where we track every key of the skip computer process into the CIP cleaning just to confirm who, when, what was done. And I thought that was pretty neat. I didn't think of this, okay? The client was the one that says, hey, I need to find a solution. And I challenged my team and it came out really, really simple way to do things to confirmation. So I see that more and more, who, what, when, how do we record it? What's the number of the process? What's the batch number? How do we track the process? I see a lot of that. Less robotics sometimes, more of a simple, what's the simplest way to make sure the guys are doing the right job?
Yeah, and it goes back to automation as well. And there are so many aspects of that, I think. And one of those, Rod, is batching. How do the right ingredients get to the equipment? In your case, all the dries and liquids. Are your customers using SG Systems or FocusWorks, or there's a lot of them out there, and they've got to rely on this equipment as opposed to having people manually throw these things into a mixer. How would you answer that issue?
Well, in the case when I interface, for example, with your unit, let's say hydrating unit, where you have a powder and a liquid coming together, and they're very accurate. It's a very accurate process. I have a very nice slurry that's going to be blended. It's going to be added to the rest of the dough. Well, if you don't have accuracy on the rest of the dough, I'm happy you're very accurate, but still there is a problem. So not only one has to be accurate on the hydration process, but you have to be accurate in the feeding of every single ingredient. And those ingredients all the minors on, and the ones that are micros that cannot possibly be automated because it's way too expensive. The client has 80 micro ingredients. So we develop, just like my friend John does, we develop micro stations where we have screens where the gram, if the operator goes 1 gram above it, he cannot continue. He has to go back and zero at the gram amount, and he continue to the next and the next liquid or dry micro, and then he builds a kit, and that kit has a number, and the number gets acknowledged in the dough process. So basically, the client that wants total automation, I don't know them. Really, I don't know any of those. I know the guys that try to get as much as automation as possible, and there are mechanisms where you can be very simplistic in controlling the process without having to buy a lot of gear. Yeah.
It's got to obviously be a combination. We talked about this that last session that I mentioned. Is what is the correct balance of manual scaling, manual everything versus automation? Because if we're not, this industry is really not at the point of lights out operations. but there is a desire to be as automated as possible. And what was mentioned was that new plants, new facilities are going to be, the term was fully automated, but again, it's not lights out, whereas existing facilities are going to be retrofitted to a certain degree, but it's not going to be automated. It's going to be more and more manual. But it's only over the last couple of years have I seen the systems that Rod, you're talking about, and they're available from, again, different manufacturers and suppliers, but these bakers are going more and more, especially obviously the large bakers, they're going more and more to these semi-automatic systems where you have a scale and a bucket and a readout, and it says, okay, I need 12 grams of whatever. A pound of salt. And if it's off by 1%, the light turns red, and you cannot move on to the next item. Exactly. It's a beautiful system. And again, that goes back to consistency as well. And then you avoid bad batches and lost doughs, because these large mixers, to the primary subject, you're mixing 3,000 pounds of dough at a time, and if you lose a dough, somebody's going to get there's going to be issues, right? So it's that balance of manual versus automation. Anybody else have any comments about that? Okay, and then we also talked about dough temperature, and obviously there's different ways to do that. Primarily, glycol jackets, and the other option. Well, there's chilled water, but there's also obviously ice. And if you're looking at horizontal systems, that's very difficult. But if you're looking at multiple, maybe robotic spiral mixing systems, then you can use ice. But mixers hate ice. You are probably cutting let me know if you guys agree. You're probably reducing the lifespan of any mixer by half if you're using a lot of ice. So, what would you guys say about glycol systems and the pluses and benefits? Talking about lifespan there as well, because glycol systems will always eventually break. So how do you extend the life of that large horizontal and the glycol system? Is it prehydration, John? Is it so you avoid the torque? But what does anybody have to say about mixing and temperature and glycol versus ice? Any comments?
Go ahead.
No, basically we look at the dough, the biggest culprits on temperature issue, and for us in the ingredient side, it will be a flour that is too warm. That would be a big percentage of the dough. So we do develop and sell and execute flour cooling systems. Before the powder gets to the hopper or at the hopper, we will cool this flour. And then we cool it dramatically depending on the dough you're making, a croissant or a cookie or whatever is necessary. Not all of the clients, they want the cost investment, so they concentrate on the mixer cooling, and they will use glycol, like you mentioned. Some of them are using CO2 directly on the dough. The chamber of mixing will have CO2, which creates a little bit of a hazard in the environment that they're working. But you are correct. The dough control could be helped if you hydrate a portion of that dough previous to dough mixing. If it is a hydration process, but that dough that hydration will have to be cool before it enters the mixer. So in the case of a hydrating unit pumping out, it will be nice to cool that hydrate in the line. You can actually do a jacketed system and cool that before it gets in, or cool it in a holding tank, or maybe the flour going into the hydration process can be also cooled before getting into the hydration unit. So there are ways, but those are the biggest culprits. Your water, your flour. It's not easy to cool sugar necessarily. There are ways, but it's not rapid or not easy. And then the other ingredients, you just have to compensate with either a jacket in the mixer or something similar. But it can be done. It can be definitely done without having a dough expert doing the calculations on your dough ingredients, the percentage of those ingredients in the dough, and what is the impact, thermal impact the enthalpy and the thermal impact of each one of those ingredients in your dough and where you want to be with the dough, you're working in the dark. You need a chemist and you need a dough guy to work out the percentage and the ideal temperature of your ingredients. I cannot do that. I'm not a baker. So.
Right. Yeah, and from the perspective of creating a cooler dough and cooling the ingredients that go into it, and then prehydration, that's obviously a subject that has only been developed over the last 10 years since we invented the category, RapidoJet, where we use chilled water going into the machine, and John has one as well, but our system prehydrates at the ideal level and then instantaneously develops the gluten structure. And so then you could add your minors and micros to that and basically fold them in and cut your mix time by 50 to 85%. Then the necessity for as much glycol, or certainly ice, can be eliminated in that case. But there again, as Rod said, there are ways to do this, and the developing field is gaining interest. And there are other benefits of increased total yield when you use high pressure to develop that gluten structure. But back to the PM, preventative maintenance and downtime issue. What are you guys finding as far as the labor issue related to downtime and preventative maintenance? Are you finding that your customers are doing fewer PMs and thus increasing the downtime because of equipment that breaks? Any issues with that?
The one I see more than, so most of the customers, especially the blue chip customers that we're talking about, they have a pretty regular schedule, and it's been, reduced. Their maintenance time has been reduced, and their cleaning time has been reduced over the years. And it's probably as small as it can possibly get, that window right now. But what I find is that that they're relying more on us or outside vendors to do a lot of that work, because they don't have people to come in, so they'll rely on us for the maintenance. And I've noticed that there's been an uptick in asking for our people to come in just to go over the equipment and look at it and make suggestions, as opposed to, they used to have 8 guys in their maintenance shop, and now they've got 4, and so can we come in and tell them how to do or what to do next? I see a lot more of that these days. Does anybody else see that?
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, Ron. I think it's an interesting thing that we're finding, not just with mixing, but across our whole product range, where because our customers can't or don't want to keep hold of all of the people that they used to have, you typically don't have any strength in depth anymore. So, and to the original question about PMs, it's resulted in the PMs, program really being abandoned in some customers. And then suddenly we get a call like, oh gosh, this is broken, that's broken. And you actually, when you visit, you suddenly find a disaster. So, there's this stark difference between the types of customers, the ones who are very driven by, good maintenance, preventive maintenance, predictive maintenance, who are doing amazingly well, where they stay on top of it and they see the value and they're prepared to pay people to do it. And the other folks who, we can get away with it for a while, and they pay a huge price later on. I've had a customer saying, my line's down, at a busy time of their year. I'm having to see if I can send a technologist to help them at like a moment's notice, because they just haven't thought about or kept on top of it. So this idea of having, it means, again, to goes back to Ron's point there, is, we've got to have the people in our business who are able to support it. Now, another big area is the reality is, especially with COVID, is we couldn't all suddenly rush to site, and I think that was a huge wake up call, is yeah, I think there was an expectation with customer service. It's okay, we can send somebody to site. Well, COVID said, oh, well, sorry, you can't do that. So we had to become more innovative. So, a lot of work that of doing and saying, well, how can we support them remotely? How have we got the ability? And let's be honest, you might have the best customer service guy possible, but they may not be able to speak on a telephone. So you've actually got to suddenly you've got to find all these other skills to support your customers, because you've actually got to have somebody who can literally talk a customer through hey, I can't get to site, but I can help you in a half an hour. But you've got to have somebody who can explain everything and literally be able to talk you through what they're seeing on the machine. And there are those really big drivers that now about this lack of people and skills at our customer sites. How do we support them in a world where we can't suddenly have somebody who can go at a moment's notice? So a lot of the changes that have been brought about, COVID just brought it to stark reality. I think we were getting to some of those points anyway, but suddenly COVID overnight said you can't go to site. So it's been an interesting thing, if you starting question from Ken about preventative maintenance, planned maintenance, and the importance of it. But again, some of how do we deal with that need and persuading our customers that they have to do that, whether they do it or we do it, but they can't not do it, and that's a critical thing for in a modern business.
Yeah, that's
and, okay. And I would assume that all of that, again, the blue chip companies we're talking about, the large bakeries probably have policies and procedures in place where they have somebody assigned to trace and track VPMs, how often they do it, who's supposed to do it, and when. But my assumption might be that a lot of these mid-sized wholesale bakers who are going to listen to this later on, one of the lessons they might be able to gain from this is that if they don't have this policy in place of doing the regular PMs and tracing and tracking these, that would be a really, really good thing to do. Because, Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that when a large horizontal goes down, let's say a glycol jacket, the minimum cost to fix that is $80,000. Is that true?
That's very high, actually. It's a lot less than that. But that would be a complete rebuild for the bowl, replacement of the bowl. But okay. I think one of the problems that I see, and with the thing is, I am not sure why our customers aren't, updating their equipment. I mean, we all make pieces of equipment that last, 10, 20, 30 years, and your bakery relies on it. And, I can't tell you how many customers I have that have 30-plus-year-old pieces of equipment. And I look at them and I go, okay, let's get something in place so that, you can come up and have, all new equipment. It's like, they're so resistant. Well, it's just working. It's fine. We don't have to do that. And it's like, yeah, today it is. But you're going to call me a year or two or three and then go, I'm down. I need something tomorrow. And it's like, I'm not going to be able to help you. And I don't think people are thinking, 2, 3, 4 years down the road at what the bakery is going to look like then, what the product mix is going to be then.
Yeah, I've always found that this industry is so incredibly resistant to change, and we have our customers have such a low profit margin item that they don't want to spend anything that they don't have to. You guys, everybody finds the same thing, I assume, correct? Also, with Kent, did you want to jump in, or again, because we're running low on time, or do we have time for a few?
I hate to cut this short, but yeah, we've reached 8:15 or 9:15, and that's our cutoff time. 45 minutes for this, and as you said, we ran out of time with the lunch and learn, and unfortunately, we run out of time with the coffee break. But I want to thank everyone for being on the call. It was a great discussion. And I think this is something that we need to continue. And so I'm going to put a pitch in for Baking Tech 2022. So everyone wants to get back together. The industry needs it. Everyone wants to be face-to-face. ASB wants to have a face-to-face meeting. We talked about COVID and all the uncertainty that that has created and confusion. And one of the problems we've seen is in association conventions and trade shows, we've all seen a lot of them, the attendance has been really low or they've been canceled. And I just want to assure everybody we are working hard to make sure that Baking Tech 2022 takes place in person in Chicago at the Hilton, March 1st through the 2nd next year. And as long as the Hilton's doors are open and the city of Chicago is allowing people to get together, we will have face-to-face Baking Tech 2022, even if it's just Rod Harris and I sitting in Kitty's drinking bourbon. We will have a meeting. So again, just thank everybody for being on the call, and
Super.
we will see you next March in Chicago.
Awesome.
That's
Thanks,
great.
everybody.
Have
Thanks
a
so
great
much,
day, everybody.
everyone.
Great job,
Cheers.
everybody. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.